Nice to meet you. My name is Jessica, and I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you the story how we revolutionized, that's a hard word, I should not choose it, how we changed developer experience with 3.5 platform engineers. And the reason why I want to tell the story is because I don't think you have to be a big team to make a big impact. And before I start telling you more, I want to tell you who I am. So I'm the what is called product area lead of engineering enablement at Cognic, the company I'm representing. What that means is that I have people, product, and technical leadership for this group of people. I'm also CNCF ambassador, CNCF Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I'm active in the Cloud Native Nordics, if you heard about the community. We have a branch in Gothenburg, and I'm also meetup organizer in Gothenburg for our CNCF meetup. I have worked as a developer. I worked as a full stack developer. I worked as operations. I worked as big data lake engineer. I worked as backend engineer, and I worked as platform engineer. And now I do none of that. But it's good to have that background for what I do. I want to tell you the story of how when I joined Cognic back in 2020, we did not have a platform team at all. And I joined with the purpose of creating one. And we were around 20 developers. The company was funded back in 2018, so it's not an old company, which means that while some things were already in place, a lot of it had been on the base of get something running and stop thinking about it. So our Kubernetes cluster was set up, but not touched for like 2 years. The things that needed to be done with infrastructure and cloud and operations and metrics and whatever, we had the go-to guy to fix that. There was always one person everyone turned to because he knew the things and he knew how to fix it. And no one really cared about those things. So when I joined, the first thing I did was to try to figure out where are we, what's the current state. And I know why we chose to do what we did, and I also know why we wanted to change. There's nothing right or wrong. There's always right at the moment you make that decision, right? And we wanted to change. So we wanted to introduce platform engineering to improve the developer experience. So first, where were we? What did we need? And in order to revolutionize, I needed a team. So I hired 3 other people that could help me out. And then I'm going to give you 3 concrete examples of tools that we introduced and how they changed the developer's experience. Before I start, I'd like to set a little bit context of the company. We had decided that we wanted to work with cross-functional and autonomous teams. That means that we wanted to structure ourselves with teams that delivered a certain part of the product, and they were able to deliver the full value for that part of the product. So we had design or UX in the teams that needed it. We had front-end, machine learning engineers, and back-end engineers for whatever part of the product. Some teams maybe didn't have a front-end because they were mainly serving some other kind of thing. And we also believe that as an empowered and autonomous team, we believe that you own the full application lifecycle. That means that you are part of figuring out what problems are we trying to solve, what customer needs are there, how can we fix that, validating that, deploying your application, figuring out if it works, getting metrics, if something breaks, you're there to fix it, like the full package. And some of you already think like, oh shit, that's a lot of things, right? And it is. And it was for us as well. And when I talk about the developer experience, like, why do I even care, right? As I mentioned, like, I have been in many different positions in software development. And it's always so much easier when you have a situation where someone has invested into developer experience because it makes your life as a developer easier. Rather than having to figure out, okay, I need to figure out if my application is working in production. And you have to start thinking, oh, like, it would be good if there's metrics, and maybe I want to view them in some kind of dashboard or whatever. It's already there. Someone already creates that for you. And you can just adjust it to fit your use case. And then I'm going to figure out if there's anything else I want to say around this. But I think, like, in general, we know there's a common set of problems, right? And if we look at, it's not an exhaustive list, it's just a few examples, but some of the things that our developers had to care about that did not have a paved road or a way of doing it is like CI, CD, load balancing, runtime, where do you run your applications, writing the business logic for that specific part of the product, checking metrics, and having auth, or handling that for, like, do we have clients, do we have users in the platform, what are they allowed to do, and how are they authorized. Maybe you want logging, something breaks, figure out what, and security and those things. And it's not by accident security is bottom right corner, because it's the first thing we think about every time we build something, right? and not like an afterthought. All of these things are part of the software development process if you have fully autonomous teams. And if we think about two different applications, two microservices, for instance, two APIs perhaps, what's the difference between one application to the other? Well, it's basically the business logic, right? That's what differs. The rest of things should work pretty much similar. Maybe you have an extra custom metric, whatever, but as long as there's a good way of handling that, that will not take a lot of extra work for you. So we want to make sure that our developers are able to spend as much time on the teal-colored box and then the white boxes. Because the more time they spend on the business logic part, the more we can differentiate our product. And we do that by providing what is called a golden path or paved road. If you search about platform engineering, this will show up because it's like a term that was coined a while back, and it's ever showing up again. So we see that as like a platform that solves common needs and allows developers to focus on what is important. And if you like watching talks online, I can really recommend you checking out Daniel Bryant's talk. It has the worst title ever. Sorry, Daniel. From Kubernetes to PaaS to what's next. That's what you search for. He presented at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con Europe in 2022. It's a great presentation that tells you why platform engineering is turning into what it is today, a little bit about the context and how we can utilize these golden paths or paved road in order to make life easier. But I think that I want to focus on the common needs in this situation. What do we mean by that? Means that we are not going to solve every problem out there, because there are 100,000 of edge cases that could show up. And if you have the platform team, as I said, 3.5 people, how many problems can you solve? There's like a limited amount of things you can spend your time on. So you heard about 80-20, right? So you can apply it to almost everything. I have no idea what it was used for first, but I'm using it for describing what you should focus on. You should focus on solving 80% of the use cases, because then you get the most common ones. And if you provide it in a way where you say, like, I have a paved road, if you follow it, it's very easy. But if you want to go out through the bushes, stay over there, and you're free to go yourself. Maybe you have to hack away and to be able to get through, and you have to find your own way back to the paved road if you want to. But you're still free to do that. That's your choice. You're an autonomous team, you can make that decision. But you probably have to do that decision with taking into account the risk of having to handle all the things yourself. Because once you're out there, you're on your own. There's no one coming in like, oh, hey, wait, let me just pave a new road for you to get back here. And my use case for this is recently we were trying to catalog what open source licenses we were relying on, because someone was scared of copyleft, which you should be, of course, as a company that sells things. And so we were trying to figure out what kind of open source license we were relying on. And some team had got on and chose their own build tool, which means that whatever we built that was the paved road for figuring out open source licenses, they could not use that. They had to come up with their own thing. And when we told them, now you have to come up with your own thing, they were like, so what, can't you fix it? You fixed it for everyone else. And we're like, but you're not on the paved road. You choose to not stay on the paved road. So now this is your problem and not our problem. That's a hard way to put it, but it's kind of like that still. You're not locked in, you have the free choice, but the free choice is coming with accountability. You're accountable to make sure that you follow through on that. And if we have the free choice, you have a market, because then you're competing against whatever else is available, right? So we need to think about our platform as a product. We need to consider that our devs are our users, except they can't hide, because we can find them in the office and on Slack and all these things. So we have easy access to our users. They can't get away with not giving us feedback on their product if we ask them, because it's very easy also to think about, oh, but that's our friend over here. We can ask them later. We know what they think already, or whatever. You have to actually consciously realize you have to go out and ask people. And you can't ask them, what do you want us to build? You don't do that for any other product. Why would you ask your devs for that kind of question? So what you need to do is tell me about your deployment process. How do you deploy a new version of your application? How do you know that the application works when you deploy it? How do you validate that it does what you expect it to do? In case you have an incident, how do you figure out what went wrong? Where do you go to look? Have them show you their working process. Then you take all the notes. You don't tell them what is going wrong. You don't tell them what they could do different. You gather that up, you bring it back to the team, and you talk about it, and you look at how you can improve the paved road to make it easier for the developers. But if you don't ask them, they can't tell you. And if you ask them exactly what they want, they don't know what is available. So you need to ask them like you would do any product, that is, explain your workflow for me, kind of. I'm sure there are other people that are more well-versed in how to do product discovery than I am, but there are some tools that you can use. So we do customer discovery. We try to do small iterations. This is my nemesis, I would say. Like whenever you do a platform change and you've realized that, okay, we have to start using a new tool for logging. Then you have to figure that out, you have to figure out if it works, and then you have to migrate all the people, and it becomes a big project. But it's probably still possible to do small iterations, it's just that we don't always succeed. And you also have to maintain and monitor. You can't just fire and forget. You are providing a paved road. That means you have to fix it if there's holes in it later or whatever. And also a big part of this is onboarding and teaching, because if you have teams, as we had when we started out, that was not used to maintain and operate their own applications, they needed education and support and help in getting used to that. So we needed to also provide, here's a good tool for doing deployments, and here's how you use it, and this is what you do when it goes wrong. Like do that support and do it in such a way that they become self-serving over time. But you can't expect that out of the box. So there's a book called Team Topologies. Anyone heard of it? Yeah, some? Good, great. So the cross-functional teams that I described before is what would be mapping to stream-aligned teams from team topologies. And they are usually like aligned to a flow of work from a segment of business domain-ish, kind of like streamlined. And then you have complicated subsystems team, which is like whenever you have a too complex problem. This is usually mathematics or anything else complex, maybe AI. And then you have enabling team, and they are supporting and helping streamline teams to overcome obstacles and detect missing capabilities. It's like a little bit educational support, maybe a developer advocate role, for instance. And then you have a platform team that is a group of other team types that provide a compelling internal product to accelerate delivery by stream-aligned teams, like developer experience, make it easy, create a paved road, make it easy to build your business logic. As a small team, we have to care about both the enabling and the platform part, because we can't have a developer advocate team on top of what we already have. So we take the approach of building both a platform as a product, but also to enable our stream-aligned teams to deliver more value faster. Because in the end, why do we have developers? It's like most companies, because we want to create some kind of business value. We want to get something out of this. And as I mentioned before, the more time our developers can spend on creating business value, the more likely we are to differentiate compared to our competitors or deliver value to end customers or whatever is our goal or mission we are on. So in the end, like, we can make ourselves succeed if we have time to focus on this. I mentioned being a small team a lot. I think it does impact how you approach this. I've been gathering like insights. I've been in the platform area since 2017, kind of, cared about this. I've been to a lot of conferences and talked to a lot of people, and everyone has a slightly different approach, but it's a general theme. And I think I hear some of the large companies that have very many platform teams, the things they do, I go like, oh my God, you're just throwing away a lot of money on this thing that I'm not even sure it gives you anything. But we have to focus because we know that we are not that many people. And I think that there were some things I had to come to insight to. And the first thing is like, you can't do all the things. People are talking about really cool stuff, and you go like, oh my God, this would be really cool. But we don't even have baseline functionality. We need to do that first. So you can't always do all the cool things. So you have to really focus and prioritize where you spend your time. I also think that it's important to realize that sometimes it's valuable to not do something. So by not acting right away, you can observe and assess before doing things. That means that you don't have to take all your developers through a spin on a different solution before you land in something totally different. So dare to sometimes not act and observe at first to realize that you understand the problem before you start delivering. The more tools you use, the more time you will spend on upgrades. There are security patches literally every day, every hour. And if you use a lot of tools, you will probably spend a lot of time trying just to keep up. So we have intentionally tried to some extent, keep down the amount of tools that we use and rely on to not be caught in just spending all our time and trying to keep up to date. And the fourth one is you probably don't need a service mesh. And it's like, it's mostly a joke, but it's also a sensitive topic. So if I insult anyone, don't mind, please. But the thing is, you go out to conferences, you talk to other people, you read a blog post online or whatever, and someone says like, I don't understand how anyone can ever work without a service mesh. And you go like, oh, shit, I have to go back and install a service mesh. You probably don't. Like, figure out your context, figure out what your needs are. Like, if you have 1 or 2 or 5 services, you probably don't need a service mesh. That's probably way overkill. If you have 500, there might be a use for it that you need, maybe. But just don't do it because someone told you in a blog post that you should do it. Or me, for that matter. Like, evaluate whatever I'm telling you here might not be right for you. Think about it, assess it, and then figure out if that's something for you. And I think that brings back to this next point. Like we talked earlier, I'm extremely action-oriented. I like finding a problem, drilling down to, okay, what are the risks, what can we do? We have these different options and everything. And it's so easy, as engineers especially, I think we are programmed to like challenges, problems, fixing things, finding the right way of solving problems. So if I just throw out a problem here, you will probably just start working on different solutions for it. And maybe a few of you realize, oh, hang on, Jessica, what was it really that you said the problem was? And so first, pause, assess, and then act. Don't jump on anything before you know what it really means. And honestly, this has really been a challenge for me. I have a mental model, I realized, like 3 years afterwards, that really helped me out. I finally could put it into a picture. I call it like slow effect magnet. And that means that you find the most important problem, you pull that in, and you solve it. You make it the paved road, you streamline it, you make sure that it doesn't take too much time from your team to do. You make it into a good baseline. And when you commoditize that one, you pick the next one and you pull a new problem in. And by doing this, it's like no risk of you pulling into many problems at the same time and not being able to deliver. It's easy to stay focused and make something more streamlined so that it doesn't take up too much time for you. And I think that this model would have also been better when we started with the platform team, because we had this situation like when we started with the platform team, all the developers were like, oh great, now they will solve all the problems I don't want to spend time on. That's perfect. And we were like, no, hang on, you still don't know your problems until we tell you we solve them for you. If I had explained it like this, they would have understood that some of these problems you are not solving today, but you might solve them next week or next year or whatever. And that would have been useful, because what we ended up with was that 2 years in, people were like, oh yeah, but you're not taking that. I'm like, but we want to take it now, we're ready for it. Like, but you said you wouldn't do it. It's like, yeah, 2 years ago we said we were not going to do it because we had this list of problems that we wanted to focus on. So in hindsight, this would have been make it easier, but it kind of worked okay anyway. So I also, 3 years afterwards, were able to phrase what we were doing into a strategy. And I think it's quite simple and probably too simplified, but it could kind of explain what we've been trying to do. So if you put it into one phrase, it is remove time-consuming tasks and bottlenecks. I know, it's probably like, it feels like it's so simple, everyone can figure this out. Why are you even taking time to tell us? And I think that it's mainly because the first step is like unblocking the developers. It's easy to forget. We want autonomous, empowered teams. We want them to be able to move forward. We want to own all the things. And if they ever are blocked, they are not able to do the things themselves. So we want to make sure that they are never blocked by us. If they're blocked, we fail. So first, focus on that. And second part, as I said, like time starvation, like it's a thing real. So remove time-consuming tasks from the team. Make sure the things go easier. And then the third one is remove time-consuming tasks from developers, because wasn't that what I said we were going to do, improve the developer experience? But unless we fulfill the first two ones, it's no use spending time on the third one, because developers still blocked, they can't do the thing. If we don't have any time, we can't work on number 3. So we have to do 1 and 2 first, so we can then focus on remove time-consuming tasks from the developers. Okay, that was a lot of talking. That was also a lot of like fluff. It was a little bit about thoughts, trying to get a structure down. But what did we really do? And I don't know if you used any of these tools. One of them is external DNS, the other one is Cert Manager, and the third one is Argo CD. Hands up if you heard of any of these before. Keep hands up if you have used them before. Cool. Then this will be fun. I will try to explain a little bit also about what problems they solve and give you a little bit of context, and hopefully that will be useful. I will give you some code examples, like hands up and stop me if you feel like it's moving too fast. Otherwise, it might still move a little bit fast. But let's start with external DNS, and I use this as an example of how we unblocked developers. More fluff. When we build things, we tend to be very push things to production and see what happens. We are building a data platform, and we have a possibility of deploying things without having the customers getting access to it right away. It's a web-based SaaS platform. And so we can feature flag and hide behind paths, etc. So often happens is that we build something, we roll it out and test it, and then evaluate, and then we start over. So for us, it was very important to get things out to production. And what that means is that we need to have a DNS record attached to something in order to be able to use it. Because we use service discovery based on DNS, and we use web-based then, of course, on DNS as well. So the DNS allocation process before, remember the teams are doing this themselves. They're building the app, there's some coding going on. I don't really care about that anymore because I'm platform now, so I don't care about code. They deploy the application, and once you deploy it for the first time, you get an IP attached to it. That's how it works, because we had set up so you got like an explicit load balancer per application. So you get your IP, and then you go to one of the 1 or 2 people that could create a new DNS record for you. And if you were lucky, you told me both which IP and what DNS record you wanted. If not, you said, hey, Jessica, I would like a DNS record. And I, whenever I had time to see that message, went like, oh, great. What's your IP and what name do you want for your DNS? And this could take like back and forth. I'm really quick. I'm Slack all the time, but it still could take like maybe half a day before you got me all the information I needed so I could set it up. So you waited and you were blocked. That's not great. But then I created a DNS record for them, and DNS should resolve and everything, and then they could keep on developing. Blocking, not happy. We don't want them to have to wait. We want them to be able to move forward at their own pace. So what we did was that we looked at the external DNS project. It's of course a CNCF project, and I already told you I'm an ambassador, but also because it's open source and free to use. You don't have to pay money for it. It plays very well with Kubernetes. So I think it's made for it, since it's under Kubernetes. Yeah, anyhow. We use Cloudflare for DNS records. So what we did was that we set that up. It's very easy to get, you get a token from Cloudflare, you configure your external DNS instance with it, and then it can keep track of records. What it does, anyone seen the DNS record before? Hands up. Okay, cool. We have the A record. It points to an IP, so you put a name towards an IP. And that's what you usually have. That's what we had before as well, except it was manually handled. So I went in and I said, I want an A record. It should be hello Argo, and it should point to X. What external DNS does is that it also adds a TXT records for the same domain and a DNS. And it tells, I own this one and I'm managing this one. That means that external DNS, whenever it gets an update in code that I should change and update this record, it can rewrite the A record to point somewhere else. This is nice because now we have a way of, by code, updating and editing our DNS records rather than going to a highly secure environment and change it by hand. So what we did when we migrated to this, because I mean we could just set this up and run and then everything new, that would work out great, but we already had, I mean, 50 records or something, maybe 70, I don't know. And we wanted to make sure that we managed them as well, because if someone removed an application, we had to go back and manually delete record and whatever. So by migrating, it was quite easy. We figured out what we had. Cloudflare has an API. We added an annotation to all the services. This is basically what you do to start tracking a DNS record with external DNS. Have you seen YAML used for Kubernetes before? Yeah, most of you, great. So it's basically the annotations part, external DNS, and then you tell what kind of DNS name do you want. Simple as that. We added that to all our services. There was some hacky bash scripts, but only run once, don't mind. And then we faked the TXT records that I showed you. We had the A records and the TXT records. We faked those in Cloudflare, pretended we were external DNS, adding those, making sure that everything that already existed was now tracked as if external DNS had added it from start. And then we deployed this external DNS to the cluster, and it was success. This was extremely easy to get started. So if you're currently creating manual DNS records, I would recommend you to look at this because it's so simple. So in the end, you remember this one? We had a wait blocker. What happened was that the developers could just build the application themselves. They could deploy, and now in their configuration, they added the annotation, and things just worked, which was great. I basically never get questions about DNS. I had them every week for a period of time. So if we're looking at return on investment, here's the 2x2 matrix. I'm just telling you right away. First of all, this was self-serve. It was great. It was also very easy to use for the developers. They caught up on it very easy. We got the feedback that this is simple, we understand it. And it removed the blocker. So if we're looking, it was like low investment and very high effect. So I would say the return on investment was high. Recommend. The second tool, Cert Manager. SSL certificates is something that you want to have if you want to have secure connection. And we are using, damn it, I lost the name. Never mind, we're using a service for that. But what we do is that we have to roll new certificates every 90 days, which means that we roll them every 60 days because we don't want to do it last minute in case something happens. The way it was set up was that we had like a custom shell scripts that had to be run in a local terminal that created a new certificate manually, prone to error. And then we had to manually edit the secrets in Kubernetes to contain the new secret. We're using the same secret in all applications. And then we had to rolling restart all the deployments in Kubernetes because we not only used the same secret, we also loaded it as a file into the deployment itself. So the containers that were running were using, don't mind. It was not great. There were some things we can improve in this area. We didn't like it because it was a lot of manual hands-on. We had to keep track of an arbitrary date in our minds, and it was like repeating and not really like rewarding. So we want to improve it. So we looked at Cert Manager. You can deploy it with YAML. You can look more at the YAML files if you want to, or you can just pull them from internet. This is a customized file. Customize is a tool of like combining different YAML files into one. And so we basically wrote one thing ourselves that pointed out Cloudflare addendum for authority and the provider. Let's encrypt. That's the one we use. Thank you. Notes helping me out. So we just combine those, set up and configure. Cert Manager also works with like 7 different domains, and it plays very nice with the ingress resource in Kubernetes, which we also started using at this point in time. So we set up the cluster to connect, and then, as I said, in the end, this is what we do. I don't have anything more here because we don't do anything, and it just rolls out. And it's so nice to not have to think about it. So the return on investment here is like remove the manual process. It did not break, but I mean it could have, and there was a lot of things to keep track of. So less cognitive load, and no rolling restart of all the things. We restart things when we deploy them, which also means that if we deploy a new version, we know that it's the version that changed and not some magic loading of things. So, I mean, return on investment here, I call it a low investment and a low return. It was nice to get rid of. It was probably not the most important thing we could spend time on, but it removed things from the team that we were doing continuously. So Argo CD, I call this remove time-consuming tasks from the developers. The truth is it was also a lot of time on the team. I will get back to why. We use Argo CD for deploying out new versions of applications and to keep track of them. So deployment process before we introduced it was that we had a build pipeline posting to Slack channel. It was called like dev builds or whatever. And you got like a message that said like application X has been built with tag Y. And then you pick up the new image tag from Slack and you run a script locally with the new image tag and the application name. And if for some reason you had chosen to name your application from something else than the container image name, then this broke. And you had to know that you were supposed to run with some magic flag to fix that. And in the background, it did like kubectl set image, kubectl rollout status. You could see like the progress of the rollout. And then it posted to Slack and said like, I just updated deployment. All of these things were baked into a black box script that no one ever looked at. There was some magic in it, which meant that it broke. And not to talk about like, does this look like it's like version controlled? Do you know what configuration you're currently running in production? So the problems with this was like, it was a black box for the developers. It was extremely hard for them to debug, and it failed a lot. We got a lot of questions about, I tried to deploy the application and it did not work. Can someone help me? And then we had to go in and we tried to figure out what went on, etc. So, and also at this time we had hidden a lot of the Kubernetes logic from the developers. So they didn't really know what was happening in the background. So when something broke, they couldn't even go in and look at that. So we also were lacking the version control of Kubernetes resources, which means that you don't know what is deployed and why. You don't know if you change a configuration, will you overwrite something? Like you have a YAML file checked in somewhere, but you don't know if that's the one that is applied. So it's very scary to change things, unless you live edited, of course, because then you did that. And there was really no way to restore if we broke. And this is probably what kept me up at night most. So we tried to address that, and what we really needed to focus on was that we needed to have the transparency. We wanted the developers to understand what was going on and to be able to figure it out. And we wanted to spend less time debugging the failures, because this was at least 7 times a week. And we wanted it to be more resilient. So GitOps, anyone? Yeah, of course, it's old now, right? If we're looking at the definition of the GitOps, it says that it should be declarative. That means that you have to have some kind of definition, like coding or text file or whatever that saves what is supposed to happen. It should also be versioned and immutable. And it should be pulled automatically and continuously reconciled. And if you want to read more about GitOps, you can check out the opengitops.dev, which is a really good page with a lot of good resources. So we introduced Argo, obviously, I already told you. YAML files, I heard a lot of shit about YAML files in the previous talk. I want to say they are not that bad. I stand by that. I might be brainwashed, but they're not that bad. XML files, that's like a different story. No, joking aside, I know YAML files get a lot of shit, but they are actually pretty easy to version control. They're declarative. If you push them to GitHub, you have pulled off the 2 first bullets for GitOps, which is quite nice. Argo CD per definition pulls automatically and continuously reconcile. So it pulls from GitHub, and then it makes sure that's what's applied into the Kubernetes cluster. So by that, you push your files, your configuration, you want to deploy something new, you push a new update to the configuration to Git, it's version controlled, saved, and then Argo CD pulls that and applies that into the cluster. Because it is like when it breaks, then you have a problem. But hopefully not that often. You can read more on the projects page. So when we migrated this, we had to like figure out what was running. This was the most pain point. Like we had some YAML files, but we had something in the cluster. We had to figure out what was real and what was not. And then we added it to GitHub repo, and then we set up Argo CD with sync disabled. Sync disabled means like pull, but don't push. And then Argo CD tells you, here's all the things that doesn't match. And then you can work on fixing that so that you don't have Argo CD overwriting something that you wanted to keep. And then we set up a migration window, and we said, like, please don't do any changes right here because we might want it kind of stable for half an hour at least. And then we enable sync, and it just works. So it was a great success, right? So the deployment process afterward was like you get a new master image tag. We had a new nicely wrapped script from GCR, Google Container Registry, to get the last tag. And then you add it to Git repository, and then you push it. And that's it. This is the 2 bullets. I even clicked through it. So the return on investment was that we had a transparent process. It was more resilient, and it was easy to use. Let's talk more about it later again. When we introduced this, it was a lot of work. It was really high investment. We spent a lot of time, especially figuring out what really was going on in cluster. And then we rolled it out. We got a really high effect of it as well. So I put medium here. But the more I thought about it, I realized that when I wrote this talk, it was quite some time since we introduced it. And over time, it really has been a high return on investment because we barely touch this anymore. Like roll out some upgrades to Argo CD, but in general, it just works, which is so nice. Easy to use. Let's talk about that. So I told you about the black box script. I told you how the things that were bad about it. The developers, on the other hand, they loved the deployment script. It was the best thing ever. They didn't have to care about anything. It just magically worked. And now suddenly they had to care about so many new things. And most of all, we removed the deployment script. They wanted to have a new, better deployment script. That was their biggest goal in life. And I think that if we would have told them a little bit more about what I told you now, like what will you get, what problems do we see, what do we want to achieve, and had that as part of the change process, like really done change management on this change, we focused on the technical problems, not on the people process change management problems. If we had focused a little bit more on that, we would have seen a lot more better adoption, I think, quicker adoption. But as it was, we had honestly like a few months where developers were kind of like mad at us for doing this change because we gave them something they didn't want to have. They wanted something else. So if I were going to do it again, I would probably do it very differently. Technically, kind of the same. But the change we did and how we did it and how we introduced it, I would have done differently. But in the end, we got this one, and I'm going to read it aloud. And it's kudos to Plateng and their work on making my life as a developer easier. Argo CD together with automatic DNS and all that good stuff really helped me today. And these are the things that make you happy, right? Because these are good things. This is a happy developer. And it's like other people like it as well, and you even get the plus sign there. There are other people that say, I agreed with this. This is also true for me. And you might see that there's not that many, but remember we were like 20 developers back in this time, so there's at least half of them really like it, which is good. So this is really nice. I've been thinking about doing a talk about change management for really bad technical things at some time, but that's a different talk. In the end, things that we more or less stopped thinking about is DNS records, certificates, and deployments. And that's true except when your company does a rebranding, because suddenly you have to care about all these things again. So last year, we changed our name from Anotel to Cognic. That's why my laptop says Anotel and Cognic. And we had to redo, we had to have a new domain, we had to redo all the certificates, and we had to change the name of all the applications and make them use new DNS records. But if we didn't have external DNS, Cert Manager, and Argo CD for handling this, it would have been a lot more painful than it was. Right now, as it was, we had to figure out mostly how we want to do the balance of the migration and getting to get the new system names up and running, and if we were going to keep the old ones, whatever. but when we were applying the changes, it was very easy. So I want to revisit the strategy we had as a small platform team was to start focusing on unblocking the developers, first of all, remove the time-consuming tasks from the team, and then remove time-consuming tasks from the developers. And that's what I had to share today. So thank you for listening. If anyone has any questions, yes.
So you talked about the technical stuff, and maybe as you get more and more of this stuff done, do you find yourself looking at the more at other types of problems, like other types of unblocking? I'm interested in the more people-oriented unblocking and enablement stuff.
So the question was, when we get more technical things done, will we focus more on the other things blocking people, such as processes and other social interactions and similar. From a personal perspective, I totally have done that. I'm no longer the half person in this team. I'm doing other things mostly. And what we're looking for, I said we have autonomous teams that are empowered to make their own decisions. And currently we're working on how we can communicate what the boundaries for that autonomy is. Because right now it's not clear for the teams what mandates they have, what decisions they're allowed to take and what not. And that is creating uncertainty and holding them back from trying things out, because they are not sure, am I allowed to try this or not? And as we heard this morning, we want to make sure that we have people that are the guest leaders, that are daring to go out and try new things and move forward, but at the same time, we can't help them break GDPR, for instance. So it's like we have to provide them with a framework to help them to that. And that are some of the things we're doing. Another thing that we're looking at is that we have set up something that we call core maintainer groups, that are interest groups where you spend about 20% of your time to create common libraries, some more software code libraries specific rather than cloud infrastructure. That is also useful for helping developers moving forward faster. That's a little bit technical, but it's more closer to the teams than to the infrastructure. Was that answer to your question? Cool. Any other questions? Yes.
Normally when you talked about adoption problems, normally when you introduce something, it goes, we're happy, run into a problem, have to regroup, try something different, and get happy. Can you comment on any of the places you ran into an obstacle and maybe changed something in your strategy or anything in order to get the better success that you got later? Did you have some hiccups and then you changed something?
Yeah, so I'm trying to rephrase the question at the same time I'm thinking about the answer. So the question was like, you get the path of happy, and then you might run into an obstacle, and this is in the aspect of adoption for what changes you do. Have you ever run into such an obstacle, and how did you change your strategy to adopt to that, was the question, I think. And now thinking about the answer at the same time. I'm not sure, actually, because we kind of did that. We had to do it mid-take on the Argo CD GitOps rollout, because honestly, we rolled it out and we migrated, and people went like, what the fuck, I can't use the deployment script. Honestly, that's what people more or less said. Probably not really nicer words, but.
So then what did you do?
What we did was, we tried to make sure that it was clear that we listened, and we tried to explain what we were optimizing for, and tried to create buy-in at a too late time. So something that we took on later on to new projects, but we were trying to more clearly make sure that we had a buy-in for a bigger change before we started rolling it out. So we made sure to go out and talk to people and trying to explain what kind of change we were looking for, how will that impact them, and do they have any concerns that we can take with us, show that we're listening to their concerns and taking that into consideration, so that even if it didn't turn out exactly as they thought it would, they felt probably, it's hard to speak for someone else, but I experienced that they felt like we had tried our best to comply to their needs. And I think that's something that we didn't do in this situation. So that's something we learned and changed in our way of working. I think there was, yes.
What do you see as the next level up for a platform team? What you've described now is technical stuff that are where the constraints are technical, but in a company you also have regulatory pressure that sometimes sits well in a centralized position. That you mentioned GDPR. it could be other stuff. What was I thinking about? Oh, I forgot. But yeah, security. So you're probably using a lot of open source software, defense against supply chain attacks, stuff like that. Do you think that is also something that that fits in with a platform team that you should take on as a challenge for?
So the question was like, now you're talking about technical infrastructure things. What about the next step? What about the security in supply chain? What about GDPR and other bigger questions? Is that something for the platform team, and how do you take it on? I think that was the question, right? So DevSecOps, it's the new DevOps, right? So basically what we're talking about is always like try to build in more functionality into the platform, your paid road. Make it easy for applications to be secure. Make it easy for developers to build secure applications. And that is something as a platform team you have to take in and try to build in. Something that we have coming up that we are planning for up early next year is that we will look at SBOM and SALSA for supply chain security, basically. And so I think that's something as a platform team you have to start with like the basic needs, and then you have to continue as the demands, whatever demands, what is important for your business right now. I mean, if we were a high security company, we probably would have focused on some other things earlier. But where we are right now, we have focused on the things that we needed at that time. That's why, once again, don't do what I tell you to do. Do what you need to do in your situation, assess. And that was what was right for us at that point in time. And then I talked a lot about observability and monitoring and those things. And I think that's also something that we as a platform team have a role in helping the teams figure out what is a good way of monitoring applications. How can we figure out when they're breaking in a good way? What kind of alerts should we have? Because I think that we could be the ambassadors for like healthy alert setups. Like you don't want to have alert fatigue by alerting on things that you don't have to act on. You want it to be actionable. And I think that being a platform team, you're in a position where you can help the teams work in those kind of things. So there's honestly an endless list in my brain and somewhat in Jira, but mostly in my brain of things we could do. And we're just trying to figure out what is most critical right now. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you get developers to understand how some of the resources you have in Kubernetes and how to use them and how to use them better?
So the question is, how do you help your developers understand some of the resources in Kubernetes and how to use them better? And the answer is multifold. Documentation. Everyone reads documentation, right? Yeah, I thought so. But you have to have the documentation in case someone actually wants to seek something up. We also actually have recently set up what we call enablement product review once a month, similar to what the development teams have. They have a product review every month where they demo off a certain part of the functionality in the product. We do similar. We've demo off a certain functionality in the platform. And it might be like, okay, so now we have this type of new resource. Here's what you use it for, and here's how it works, and this is what it will give you in value. So for instance, we use that. We sometimes, when we see there's a need, we also do like certain workshops in certain areas. We have had like getting started with Kubernetes workshop, of course, and then we have also had like, this is how you get started with span metrics. This is something you can use with OpenTelemetry, and etc. And we try to make sure that we provide that both timely when people ask for it, but also sometimes out of thin areas. Hey, anyone interested in learning more about this? And depending on where people are at that point in time, some might listen. And if we're lucky, we get some representative from each team, and then they go back to their team, and when they have a problem, realize, oh right, the platform team can actually tell you more about this because I heard they had something about that. And we don't need them to know everything. We need them to know enough to know to come and ask us for help when they want to do it. Anyone else? Cool. I will be around during the afternoon if anyone wants to talk more. So thank you so much for listening.